In 2019-20, the financial year, we have recycled about 10,000 tons of electronic waste divided over 2 different facilities. We are doing about 70 to 80% of white goods, that is your washing machines, refrigerators, air conditioners and televisions.
India generates about 2 million metric tons of electronic waste every year, and just 5% of it is recycled by the formal sector. Namo eWaste was set up in 2015 with an aim to reduce that gap and build a successful business enterprise around it. The presence of toxic materials in electronic goods and equipment make it incredibly hazardous, and disposing it off even more delicate.
When we talk about informal recycling, these people, since they have no awareness, they do all the acid leaching methods. They will just simply burn the material and take out the valuables, dump the rest of the things on the ground or just into the rivers or somewhere. So the difference between formalized and informal recycling is simply that we take care of all those factors in our process. So our process has got no emissions in the form of toxic chemicals, harmful gases or any other kind of emissions. We pay a lot of attention of all the hazardous elements that are generated during the process of recycling, and then we responsibly dump it to the government approved sites.
Babita is one of the 100 women that work at this e-waste management company. Her hands moved swiftly in segregating heavy metals and other electronic wastes like wires and printed circuit boards. Fully aware of how her work helps reduce the damage electronic materials can do.
यहाँ पे ना माल की छटाई होती है, जैसे कॉपर, पीतल, एल्युमिनियम, जिंक, लेड। जैसे ये कन्वेयर चल रहे हैं यहाँ पे, उस पर माल चलता है और उठा के जौन से जैसे वायर का डब्बे में सेकंड आता है वायर एंड ग्रीन कार्ड और थर्ड आता है एल्युमिनियम। इलेक्ट्रॉनिक की वजह से हो रहा है। और जैसे ये जिंक है, लेड है, ये वेस्ट मटेरियल है जो हमारे पानी में ना मिले और हमारी यूज़ करने वाली चीज़ों में ना मिले। उसको जैसे यहाँ पे भट्टी है, हमारी कंपनी में भट्टी है, जैसे कॉपर हो गया, पीतल हो गया, उनको जलाया जाता है, मतलब भट्टी में गलाया जाता है और उसको यूज़ करा जाता है।
The leftover materials extracted from the waste are brought to another facility of theirs. Here, it is put into a furnace to melt and be reused. Like these aluminium ingots that are then supplied to various car makers in the country. While government rules are starting to guide the production end, there's still work to be done to make consumers more aware. Manufacturer and consumer participation is key to efficient e-waste management in any country.
Informal recycling is quite prominent in India. So now government has come out with new norms. They've given extra onus, extra responsibility to the producers and manufacturers of these electronics, that they have to collect and get it recycled from the market. And I think in next 4 to 5 years, we will reach to a potential where we would be recycling over 70 to 80% of e-waste in the formal sector.